Hello everybody and welcome to my Magicka Nightblade PvP build video for the Elsweyr chapter. Let's jump right into it. We are a high elf, which is probably the best race for the class. With that being said, Breton is also very strong and other races also work, like Dark Elf for example. Even Khajiit or Nord are good. We have put 64 points into Magicka obviously. That brings our max Magicka up to just over 39k, which is very strong. Max health is about 19k, which goes up to about 24k in PvP. Maximum stamina with just over 11.5k seems a little low, but it is good enough in my opinion. Magicka recovery is 1.9k, fully buffed, that goes up to about 2.4k. That is very strong. And our stamina recovery with 810 makes up a little bit for the little max stat we have here. Our spell damage is 2.2k unbuffed and the spell crit is about 35%. Both of those go way up with the buffs, so fully buffed our spell damage is about 3.4k and the spell crit about 45%. Our resistances are really high. Unbuffed they go up, or they are at 20k. Fully buffed, I'll go a little bit more into detail, we're over resistance cap with this one. 2.6k critical resist. Very strong. I think about 2.5k is probably the minimum you want to run. And spell penetration 11k unbuffed. That is where quite a lot of our damage comes from. We're running the Apprentice Stone and the Witchmother's Potent Brew. So I'm aware of the changes in the Elsweyr patch, so this is going to be a little more detailed because quite a lot changed. So I know that Witchmother's Potent Brew got quite a hard hit, but we're still using it because of the sets we run. Also, we run the classic Essence of Spell Power that gives us the crit, the damage and Magicka back. Jumping into the sets, as you can see, our monster set is Bloodspawn. We run a 5 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy setup. So we have the heavy headpiece and the medium shoulder piece. Full impen, tri-stat enchants on the big pieces and max Magicka on the small pieces. So why do I want to run Bloodspawn? Because tankiness is the meta, and it still is. It's actually even more the meta now in Elsweyr. I like Bloodspawn on Magicka builds because that one piece stamina recovery comes in really handy for CC breaking, for blocking and dodge rolling. It's really nice. On top of that, it's insanely good for Nightblade in particular because of the ulti you get. So Nightblade already gets quite a lot of ulti back from their passives, and it gives you insane resistances with almost 6.5k when it procs. Our armor set on the body is going to be fortified brass. Basically all it does is it gives us resistances, and it gives us a lot of resistances. The 1-piece max health or the 2-piece max health is also really nice. Yeah, but that is basically all it does. So our other set here is Bright Throat's Boast. We have that because it's a max stat and a recovery set, which I really like. That being said, there is different options, so you could run Necropotence and with the shadow image proc the Necropotence, so it gives you quite a bit more max Magicka, but you will lack recovery then. That is why I chose Bright Throat's Boast. Speaking of other sets, by the way, you could run different monster sets as well, like Pirate Skeleton, very popular at the moment, gives you the 30% less damage taken, so the major protection, really strong. Also gives you Minor Defile, though I personally just don't like the set very much, and I love Bloodspawn, so that's why I run it, but there is definitely different options. So back to Bright Throats, we run full Arcane, 2 spell damage and 1 Magicka recovery. I've tried full spell damage here and it also worked, but if there's a more tricky situation where you're outnumbered, you kind of want to go for more sustain. The build hits very hard. That 1 sustain glyph doesn't really change that a lot. I'd rather have more sustain than even more damage, because it is definitely enough damage. So moving on, our front bar, it is a Flame Staff sharpened with a shock damage enchantment. Sharpened is here because I already mentioned the tankiness is the meta, and sharpened is a direct counter to it, or penetration. So that's why we mainly focus on that. The shock damage glyph is here because it has the chance of giving you the minor vulnerability on your enemy, increasing your damage done by 8%. That is no longer important to us because we have another way of getting minor vulnerability, so you could run anything here, right? You could go for Oblivion damage, you could go for Fire, or even the Absorb Magicka for even more sustain. That is totally up to you. You could even go for poisons if you wanted. On our back bow we have Resto Staff infused with a weapon and spell damage enchantment. That's pretty much a classic. Everyone knows that. Yeah, that weapon and spell damage glyph gives us about 450 more spell and weapon damage, which is really nice. And in case we run out of sustain, we can always heavy attack with the Resto Staff to get insane amounts of resources back. Jumping into our skills, here is where it gets interesting. So number 1, Elemental Drain. I've always used this on my Magicka Nightblade because it's just too strong of a skill not to use. It gives you the Major Breach for 24 seconds, reducing their spell resistance by 5.3k, essentially negating their armor buff, which is definitely needed, especially now. Also applies Minor Magicka Steal to the enemy for 24 seconds, causing you and your allies to restore 300 Magicka every second when damaging them. Which essentially, if you damage them, right, if you have your dot up on them, that's already enough. That translates to 600 Magicka recovery, which is insane. So that was not included in the 2.4k earlier, so with that you are at about 3k Magicka recovery, which is insane. Our next skill is Lotus Fan. So with Elsweyr they reworked how gap closes work, so they now work more reliably, they work faster, and some of them do more damage and got other buffs. Lotus Fan or Teleport Strike in general got a buff, so you get the minor vulnerability for 8 seconds, increasing your damage, or increasing the enemy's damage taken by 8%. That is very good. That is why we use it, and it's also a direct counter to Sork streaking away, which is really nice. But the 8% more damage taken for your enemy is not all it does. It does quite a bit of damage fully buffed, about 7k. The tooltip at least is 7k. And it puts a dot on your enemy, so really, really nice. Our next skill is our spammable Swallow Soul. Steal your enemy's life force, dealing 8.6k magic damage and healing you for 37% of the damage inflicted every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. Fully buffed, again, that goes up to 10.5k tooltip. The heal is nice. It's not something you want to rely on. It's not strong enough for that, but it's nice to have. The next skill, Merciless Resolve. So that is one of the most controversial things in the PTS or the time leading up to Elsweyr. So let's jump into what it does now, because it got changed, definitely. So focus your senses for 20 seconds, reducing your damage taken by 3% with every light or heavy attack up to 5 times. So basically what that means is the stacks you need to build to proc your Spectral Bow now passively give you 3% damage taken, less damage taken each. So that goes up to 15% less damage taken, which is insane. You're so tanky, it's insane. While active, hitting an enemy with 5 light or heavy attacks converts this ability into Assassin's Will, allowing you to fire a Spectral Arrow for half the cost. That deals 18.7k magic damage and heals you for 50% of the damage dealt if you're within 7 meters of the enemy. So if you're within 7 meters, it's not going to be a problem because we're playing this as a melee build. The heal, again, very nice but not really reliable, since it can be dodged or blocked really easily. They changed the traveling speed again, so it's now 250 milliseconds minimum travel time instead of 450, so it hits more reliably, but it's not a 100% reliable heal. And fully buffed, the tooltip goes up to about 21-22k, which is really strong. So what that all means is, it is probably better for everyone to play a little more tactically now. So if for example, if I can't be sure that I have a very good chance to land that, I will just not shoot that bow. I'd rather have the tankiness and use the bow when I'm certain I can hit it, right? Or when I need the heal. But yeah, it kind of makes you play a little more tactically, which I really like. And it makes you insanely tanky. Like, we're on a light armor build and we're just so tanky. Next skill, everyone knows that, Shadowy Disguise. Cloak yourself in shadow, become invisible for 3 seconds. Your next direct damage attack used within 3 seconds will always be a critical strike. Classic for the Nightblade. The invisibility is really nice for kiting, and the crit is really nice for the heals basically, and for the damage of course. So we're gonna go a little bit more into detail about that in just a second. Our ultimate here is Soul Harvest. It is unaffected by the changes, so it's still the same. Ravage an enemy with a spinning attack, dealing 14.6k magic damage, increasing your damage against them by 20% for 6 seconds. Also afflicts major defile, reducing the healing received and health recovery by 30%, and while slotted, anytime you kill an enemy, you gain 10 ulti. So again, fully buffed, that goes up to 16 or 17k damage. The rest is as it was before, didn't get any nerfs like Incap did. Backbar. Mass Hysteria. Again, something they changed really nicely. Summon Dark Spirit to terrify up to 6 enemies, causing them to cower in fear for 5 seconds. So everything about that is insane. 6 enemies, really strong. Cower is really nice because they no longer run away from you. I really like that change in particular. And the stun lasts for 5 seconds. If they don't have the stamina to CC break that, you have all the time in the world to kill them. It is insane. Next skill, Crippling Grasp. Seven enemies, agility, wreck them with pain, dealing 3.2k magic damage and an additional almost 16k damage over 10 seconds, immobilizing them for 2 seconds and reducing their movement speed by 30% for 4 seconds. So there is a different morph of that that's also viable. For this build we're not going to use it because the difference is Debilitate doesn't give you an initial hit, it doesn't immobilize, but it gives you a higher snare, and it gives you minor Magicka Steal, but we already have that from Elite Rain, so we really don't need it. I'd rather have the immobilize and the initial hit damage. The next skill here is Blessing of Restoration. So this is a light armor build, but it is, as mentioned, insanely tanky. So usually you would see people running shields here, like Dampen Magicka or Harness Magicka or the Healing Ward. We don't need that. We're way tanky enough, so we just need a burst heal. The reason why I went for Blessing of Restoration is because it's a higher tooltip on the heal, right? And that's what I wanted to go for, because the other heals, as I mentioned, are not 100% reliable, especially if you're fighting a very good player. So that is definitely what you want to go for. If you would decide to use Combat Prayer though, you would get the Minor Berserk, which they took away from Merciless Resolve. So basically, Minor Berserk gives you 8% more damage done, right? So you would get the 8% more damage done from Minor Berserk and the 8% more damage taken on your target from the vulnerability with Lotus Fan. So that is actually a huge buff. I mentioned it before with the recovery glyph though, the build hits way hard enough, right? So you don't need it. I'd rather go for the better heal. Just my opinion though, use whatever you like here. It also grants us Minor Resolve and Minor Ward, increasing our physical and spell resistance by 1.3k for 15 seconds, bringing us very close to the hard cap of resistances. So we already established we have 20k resistances unbuffed, plus the 5.3k from our Shadow Barrier, which is the major armor buffs we get from using a Shadow ability, plus that 1.3k from Blessing of Restoration, plus Blood Spawn, brings us very close to 33k, and that translates to 49 to 50% damage mitigation, right? So we're very close to that. I think it's 49% damage mitigation plus the 15% if we have the stacks up here. That is pure insanity. We're in a light armor build. It's insane. So moving on, next skill, Race Against Time. This skill is the reason why I love playing my Magicka Nightblade in open world again. We finally have a snare removal. So important, so good. Bend time and space around you to gain Major Expedition for 4 seconds. Really nice for kiting if you want to go to line of sight and you don't have your shade up, which shouldn't happen, but you know, it can happen. and Minor Force for 12 seconds, increasing your movement speed by 30% and your critical damage by 10%. Really nice, because as a Nightblade we get a passive that gives us more critical damage, and with Race Against Time we get even more critical damage. And that is what I mentioned earlier. If we have Race Against Time up and then we cloak, we get our guaranteed crit, and if we use Swallow Soul, then it hits very hard and the heal is gonna be very good as well. Yeah, activating the ability removes all snares and immobilizations from you and grants you immunity to them for 1.3 seconds. That goes up to 2 seconds once it's fully ranked, so to rank 4. Different option if you don't have the Psijic skill line yet, definitely Phantasmal Escape. So that way you don't get the Expedition or the Minor Force, but you get Major Evasion, reducing the damage taken from area of effect attacks by 25%, and it gives you the immunity to immobilizations and snares for 4 seconds instead of 2. So that is definitely a viable option here. Our last skill, Shadow Image. The classic, you summon a shade version of yourself to attack the enemy for 20 seconds. The shade shoots an enemy dealing 2.2k magic damage and afflicts your enemy with minor maim, reducing that enemy's damage done by 50%. Again, that adds very nicely to our very tanky build already. While the shade is summoned, you can activate the ability to teleport to the shade's location, which is the reason why we use it basically. And the last line there, this ability scales with your highest offensive stats, just means that it's now even more viable for Stamina Nightblades as well, because it scales off your max Magicka or spell damage when that's higher, but it scales off your max stamina and weapon damage when that is higher, which is really nice. Our ulti on the back bar, I have Light's Champion. It literally doesn't matter what you want to run. You could run the other Morph here, you could run Soul Tether or Soul Siphon. It really doesn't matter. It's just basically an oh shit button. If you're really good with playing this and you have the Psijic Order, I'd recommend Temporal Guard. Gives you minor protection, so 8% more tankiness even, so it's insane how tanky you are. Have I mentioned that? It's insane. Yeah, with that all being said, it is kind of buff heavy, right? So if you have an enemy here, you want to keep up your Ellie Drain. Of course you want the Merciless, and then Race Against Time. Shade has to be down anyways. The Blessing of Restoration, Cripple, Potion, go in, and then we have our rotation ready. So yeah, that all being said, I will include some gameplay after this build video, of course. Sorry it's a little bit longer than the usual, but I focused a little bit on, you know, all the changes in Elsweyr, which is really important in my opinion. I will include the champion points in the description below, and there will also be a link to the UESP website where I have a version of the build, so you can look it up if you want to. So with that all being said, if you have any comments or questions, ask them in the comment section below. Message me on Facebook or Twitter, or check out one of my Twitch streams, guys. I recently started streaming again on Twitch because now my internet is better. If you want to see live gameplay or want to ask me questions and get them answered almost immediately, hopefully, just join me there. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time. Surprise! This is Editing Umbrio with a quick update on the build. After recording the build video, I had an idea, so I tried it and it works very well, especially in BGs and in small groups. So what I did was I changed the body set from 45 brass to shackle breaker, still running 5 light pieces and full impen, but because the build was now way squishy, I changed all the jewelry traits to protective. The build is still a little squishier that way, but you have more damage, more sustain and more stamina for blocking, dodging or CC breaking. I definitely recommend that version of the build for group play, or if you're really comfortable with the playstyle, right? If you're trying to figure the playstyle out, I recommend using 45 brass version because you're tanky and it's a little more forgiving. The link to the UESP website for both builds is in the description of the video. Enjoy!
that you're